Hi there everyone, thank you so much for watching our video today. We're going to be chatting through Nebula's approach to optimizing a client's mobile environment. So today I'm chatting to Cicero, our team lead for our shared support services team, the team that's actually responsible for driving the optimizations with our clients. How's it, Craig?
Hi, Fred.
Craig, so let's jump in. Tell us a bit about yourself, when you started with the company, your history with Nebula, and then just where your passions lie.
Awesome. So I started at Nebula in June 2018 as a business support specialist in the shared support services team.
Yep.
I moved on to becoming the team leader of the shared support services team in January 2020.
So just before COVID?
Just before COVID.
Sheesh, yeah, good luck, eh? No pressure.
So I pride myself in building strong relationships with my team members based on trust. And with that, I then would enable myself to work effectively with the team to deliver world-class service to our clients and ultimately exceeding their expectations.
And that's what we're about, making sure that we don't only meet expectations but exceed expectations.
Exceed expectations.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. Craig, so let's get down to it. So when we take on a new client, what are the things that we look at? Where do we start? What is our approach? Do we do short-term, medium-term, long-term? Talk us through that thinking.
Sure. So when we onboard a new client, we look at various things. What sets us apart, or I would say what makes us unique, is that we don't just look at the current client environment, we look at the historical data as well. So we look at where the client is coming from and where they currently are now, and possibly, well not possibly, where they need to be with regards to cost savings and optimization.
Yeah. And making sure that the workforce is enabled, because at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do.
For sure. It's all about business continuity with the client. And that is where we come in. We make sure that, number one, there's business continuity. The client or the users can connect wherever they are at a cost-efficient rate.
For sure.
We manage the costs and we manage the connectivity.
Yeah, so let's dive into the short-term, medium-term, and longer-term goals. So whenever we take on a client, we always look at what's kind of the low-hanging fruit. Which are the things that we can do, like say between month 0 and month 3?
Yeah.
What are those type of things that we look at?
So for sure. So what we do is we look at the low-hanging fruit, stuff that we can immediately have an impact on, is stuff like the client's employee file. We find that a lot of clients don't always manage that as they should, because that's not their expertise. That's Nebula's expertise. Yeah. So we manage that, the employee file, the inactive employees. We look at dormant SIM cards, SIM cards that hasn't been in use for 6+ months.
So that's those low-hanging fruits is something that should be kind of obvious, but the clients don't do that necessarily, because I don't think they have. Firstly, it's not a big priority for them. There's massive projects and things running that they don't really watch that or monitor that as closely as they should do. Where we make sure that, there's been so many instances where we start off with a client and look at the amount of SIM cards that are linked to users who are no longer with the company. It is crazy.
Exactly.
And then also looking at dormant SIM cards. So that's a very good example where we have SIM cards that the company are still paying for, but there hasn't been usage lying in someone's drawer for the past year or 6 months.
Exactly.
With no usage on. Great. Yeah. What are some of the other short-term things that we look at?
So the other short-term things, quick wins, we're looking at roaming costs. Obviously over the last 2 years, there hasn't been a lot of that. However, prior to that, it's starting to pick up again.
For sure.
We monitor and manage whenever a user goes abroad and they roam. So we make sure that they're always on the most cost-effective plan, because that's not something that a user will take note of or make sure that they're on a cost-effective plan. They just want to switch on their mobile phone and use it.
Exactly.
So we manage that to prevent bill shock. And bill shock is a term that is quite obvious to a lot of people nowadays, and with regards to roaming, we do that.
And I just quickly want to dive in a bit more about bill shock. So I think one thing that sets us apart is that we don't wait for the bill to come at the end of the month. We monitor it throughout the month. Just kind of talk us through that. So roaming is one of the things that we look at. What are some of the other things that we look at throughout the month to manage that?
The data usage. I mean your data usage, which is your primary function that we look at. So we look at, because we proactively manage data usage, because of our integration with all the vendors, we actually get a feed. So we actually can see how much consumption, how much data you've consumed in a real-time scenario. So,
and how much data you have left.
You have left. Now, when we manage that and when we monitor that, we actually look at, because if you have, say, 1 gig left and there's still more than half of the month left, we proactively load a bundle. that will prevent you from going out of bundle, and it will prevent you from having connectivity issues. Out of bundle is obviously the killer, because that's the huge cost.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, some of the directives that I can remember we got from clients is that I don't care about the cost now, just make sure everyone stays connected.
Yes.
And then secondary comes cost, but that's what they say during, but when it actually comes to build time,
exactly.
What's my cost?
Exactly.
Great. So short term, definitely doing the monitoring. Let's talk about some of the alerts and notifications that we send out to the users.
Yeah.
What does that do? What does it enable for a customer and for their users?
So the alerts and notifications, we send out user notifications on, say, usage. That creates an awareness for the user, because now they know, hey, I've used X amount of data for the month. So that creates an awareness, which in turn drives behavior changes. Our exception reports, that goes out to line managers, so that they can also drive awareness, so that they can be aware of what their employees are consuming and the volume.
Okay, great. Okay, cool, great. Thank you. So now we've covered some of the short-term objectives. We now have a clean base. Let's talk about some of the more medium and long-term objectives and what we do to achieve those.
Sure. So the medium-term objectives are under contract renegotiation.
Right.
Because of our extensive experience and our knowledge in the field, we can then guide a client as to what is the best option to suit their needs.
Exactly. Yeah.
What we also do is, with our automation, we've got integration with all our vendors, and with that we can do real-time support with IMACDs, for argument's sake, doing SIM swaps in real time, or getting a PIN or PAC number in real time, instead of escalating where it takes 5, 6, almost 24 hours to get. We can do it within minutes.
Yeah. And automation, also we're talking about not only IMACD automation, so SIM swaps, PIN, PAC requests, locking of a SIM card, so forth, but also looking at report automation. So, for example, cost recovery reports, usage reporting to users and to line managers.
For sure. So what we do is we do we call it a recharge report. So that's basically cost recovery. So normally, where it would take a client hours of manual work, because of because of our one view, and because what we do is we can automate that, so that can go out to the various stakeholders at the client.
And to automate that to such an extent using one view that it uploads directly into the client's ERP system.
For sure.
Which saves a massive amount of time.
A massive amount of time, massive amount of effort.
Yeah. So also on the medium term, let's just quickly touch on deployment type changes. So what we've seen, at least in my experience, what I've seen a lot is that what used to count 3 years ago on a deployment model is no longer the norm, or it's not normally necessary anymore.
Definitely.
Specifically, if we look at like an APN type deployment model, which is super expensive, we're talking about 11 cents per megabyte approximately. What do we look at in those instances? What stores do we pull to change that?
So specifically on that, say 3-4 years ago, the APN deployment model was enough for most businesses, because most people used to work in the office. Because of how the world has changed, that is no longer the case. Like you said, you mentioned the APN is 11 cents per megabyte, whereas you can get a data contract where you can pay 2 cents per megabyte. So we look at those type of deployment models, and we try and advise based on the usage, because the user consumption has definitely increased massively over the past 2 years.
I want to get to the increase in consumption in a bit, but just back to the change of APNs to Open 3G cards. So a big concern for clients were around security, where APN provides you with robust security, where Open 3G cards does not. Using like notifications and like the after hours and exceptions and stuff that we do, how did that kind of overcome that fear of security or abuse, the fear of abuse, perhaps rather? Well,
that has actually given the client a holistic view. I think where there was a fear of security was a case where they weren't sure whether they will be able to manage or control that from a security or a cost perspective. Because of our notifications and our after hours support, and that's all automated, the client now are more at ease. They've got peace of mind, because they get these constant notifications, and before something gets out of hand, we are proactively notifying everybody and stopping that excessive usage.
Exactly, because they have the one view safety.
Because they've got the one view safety.
Okay, great. And then last, I just quickly want to touch on the longer term stuff. What do we look at more, say 9 to 12 months from starting with a client? So that's normally where we start to see users' behavior starting to change. So once we start, there's a lot of changes that happen. So we implement, we do alignment, making sure that users are on the correct contract. Blah, blah.
Yes.
Now we have a clean base. Now, how do we maintain that? Why? And I always use the analogy of taking the foot off the petrol.
Yes.
So what happens if we take the foot off the petrol? Everything just skyrockets again. So what do we do to make sure that that base stays constant and the cost actually goes down?
So it's all about maintenance. Once we clean up the whole environment, we put procedures in place, like your notifications, your exceptions and everything. And then it's all about monitoring on a daily basis, consistent monitoring. We monitor, we do monthly steercos. We've got where we actually sit with the team in charge at the client. We explain to them, this is your environment, this is this team, this is what this team is doing, this is what that team is doing. So it's all about how we maintain it by keeping everything consistent.
Absolutely. I think a big portion of that is also managing the change over the period. So
for sure.
Once we start to introduce all the different changes and the monitoring and the notifications, everything that goes out, once a user is aware of what's happening, and not to play policeman with the users, but just that they know that their usage is being monitored.
Yes.
Especially from a line manager perspective, that leads to massive behavior change.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Definitely.
Craig, then lastly, what I just quickly want to touch on, what are some of the results that we've seen over the past, let's take a few examples.
So we've seen tremendous results with regards to consumption versus cost. Because of what we do and how we do it and the deployment models that we've implemented. Actually, in the professional services, we've actually seen where we've moved away from a traditional APN, where we've moved over to a bundle situation, like a discounted bundle. We've seen a massive reduction in cost, up to almost 50%.
Wow.
And then if you look at generally in the professional services, we've got where consumption has increased by 300%. However, the cost only increased by 2%.
Yeah, that's great.
Which is amazing, given the fact if we still used our old way of working, that cost would have increased probably by 600%. You know, that's the professional service. In our large banking services as well, we've seen an increase, a massive increase in data.
It's a large workforce at the end of the day. Now everyone needs to work remotely. It's massive,
Exactly. It's a very large workforce. We've seen increased usage percentage of over 400-500% increase in usage. However, the cost has actually either remained stable, the same, or it's actually gone down a bit.
Amazing. Hey?
Which is amazing for the client.
It just goes to show how important it is to have the necessary measures in place to control the cost.
Of course.
And to have an expert to actually manage that.
For sure.
In many instances, the clients don't have the necessary expertise internally. They're worried about projects running or external clients that they need to. The client needs to focus on what they need to focus on. Let us do what we are good at.
There we go. That's exactly it.
Okay, great. Craig, thank you very much for your time, and this was a great chat. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Fred.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us today, and please watch out for more videos to come. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks, bye.